All right, folks. Well, we have resumed with somewhat better technology this time around. I am going to kick us off, and then we will go straight into Q&A and then lunch after this. But first, it's time to welcome Eeshaan Sawant to join us on the Right to Docs stage. Eeshaan's talk is more than about just documentation. It's about creating a space where everyone feels seen and included regardless of their language, identity or ability. You'll hear some shared lessons from leading open source communities on tackling inclusivity challenges and how these communities turn these challenges into opportunities. You'll also get some tips to help you make your documentation not just informative, but genuinely welcoming and inclusive for everyone. And Eeshaan tells me that while they might be able to miss a day off work occasionally, they never miss an opportunity to lift weights at the gym. And given we're in Melbourne, Eeshaan happens to be in the perfect place to brag about how much pride they take in brewing the perfect cup of coffee. Food is another of Eeshaan's passions, so that should be pretty well served here in Melbourne as well. Hopefully, the coffee is living up to his reputation here, Eeshaan, but for now, I think we're all very keen to enjoy a perfectly brewed presentation. Folks, join me in welcoming Eeshaan Sawant.
All right. Well, good morning, or I'd say good afternoon maybe now. Good afternoon, right, dogs. Australia 2024. I'm sure you all are doing great. It's lovely to be in Melbourne, actually. And also, thank you for that introduction, Jared. I don't think anyone would have done that better than you. Yeah, let's just get some coffee if anyone's around this evening. Yeah. So, again. So today I'm here to talk about Global Voices, Inclusive Docs, how open source has set the standard for inclusivity, and how you can as well. And this is going to be more or less my first international solo experience of speaking. So if I miss a word or two, or if I stutter like I just did, just forgive me. So yeah, before we begin, here's a little bit about me. Of course. Here's a little bit about me. I am Eeshaan Sawant. I'm Indian, raised and born. I am a computer science student, and I work as a technical writer as a profession, and I am also a coffee enthusiast. And I like just sipping and grinding coffees from all around the world as a hobby. And in case you haven't noticed yet, I am holding a coffee right here in this picture as well. Yeah. And I'm also a pro at juggling between being a student and being a technical writer, and that is because I'm still in college. I'll be graduating next year in April, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in open source since the first year of my college, which eventually got me into OnlyOffice, which was in the second or the third year of my college, which then I eventually transitioned into a technical writer role. Just for those who don't know, OnlyOffice is an open source collaborative office suite. But anyway, before we begin, let's look at the title again. It says Global Voices, Inclusive Docs, how open source sets the standard for inclusivity. I had to stress this one, sorry. And how you can do too. Well, let's start from the basics here, right? What is inclusivity? And the answer to that is going to be inclusivity is a space where everyone belongs and not just fits in. And we'll come to the meaning of that in a few minutes. But before that, I want to ask you, how many of us have ever struggled to understand any kind of technical content before? Great, yeah, that's a lot of hands, but I was just going to give some examples about if there were not a lot of hands, but still, here are the examples because they are in the slides. So take a look at this image, and then take a look at this image, although this seems English, but this is not, this is something else. So now who'll say that they've struggled understanding technical content? I think everyone, because great. So yeah, okay. So you see, documentation is written, and it is written a language Naturally, the language determines comprehension, so it is critical to understand that not just the spirit of content, but the language and the medium of content matter too. It is obvious here that because most of us didn't know those characters that we just saw earlier, we were not able to comprehend that document easily. This is what the simplest of inclusivity issues can look like. So now we have a problem, language, because when words fail to connect us, the technology they describe becomes meaningless. But I know you all are very intelligent, so maybe it's not your smarts or comprehension ability. Maybe it's something else. For many people, it is something, because you see, inclusivity is more than just bridging language barriers. Of course, it's the most talked about when it comes to making documentation inclusive for everyone and all of that. But trust me, there are other problems that I'm aiming to introduce you all to today. Yeah, let's take a moment to think about people around the world who consume documentation. They all come from diverse backgrounds, diverse abilities, and diverse identities. And the word diverse can mean really, really diverse, but I'm going to actually simplify this into three groups of people that I'm going to talk about today. And those are going to be, first starting with LGBTQ individuals. The next one is going to be underrepresented groups. And the third one is going to be people with accessibility issues, right? And the third one is going to be the most important one. Okay. And you might also ask, well, why is it so important to respect and include these groups in documentation? And the answer to this lies in the undeniable benefits of diversity. Time and again, research and real-world examples have shown that diverse teams and communities bring unique perspectives, foster creativity, and drive innovation. When a broader audience can access, understand, and contribute to your documentation, especially if it's an open source project, it directly improves not just product itself, but also the ecosystem that you work in or the ecosystem that surrounds you. Anyway, let's get starting about let's get talking about LGBTQ individuals. In this particular section, I'll be talking about transgender people, non-binary people, and genderqueer people. And yeah, again, some of us might again wonder what challenges could these people face when it comes to documentation. Well, trust me, there are plenty, but one of the biggest hurdles the LGBTQ group faces as a whole is how terminology is represented in docs. Uh, yeah, terminology is represented in docs. I just lost track. Yeah, terminology is represented in docs. For example, I'll just pronouns like he or she in your content were perfect maybe 50 or maybe 80 years ago, but now such language excludes individuals who don't identify strictly as male or female. Let's take this a step further. Beyond non-binary people, think about women. A woman, a girl, or a female is indeed one of the two binary genders. This is an undeniable fact. But guess what? A shocking reality is that over 70% of the content on the internet still predominantly uses he as the default pronoun. And that is quite surprising. When all it takes is just a slash in between, it's just he slash she. That is what you need to include in your content, but still, it's surprising. And not only that, well, let's consider another issue when it comes to this group. Even something as simple as the choice of names in examples can be problematic. Docs often default to names like John for a boy or a man, and Jane for a girl or a woman. Uh, this is completely harmless if we normal people think about it. But repeatedly using these names can subtly discourage engagement from the LGBTQ group with your content. Again, why? Because it reinforces traditional binary identities, which well, deliberately or not deliberately ignores the spectrum of gender and the diversities in genders that exist today. Well, that was just a short introduction about this group. Next, we'll move ahead to underrepresented groups. Yeah. Now we'll move on to our next group, the underrepresented groups. In this quick section, I'll be talking about historically marginalized, underprivileged, and underrepresented groups. The world is a big place, and the content you make can be accessed by maybe a black person with with African origins, or an aboriginal person. I'm sorry if I spelled that wrong. An aboriginal person in Australia. You really don't know. You see, these marginalized groups face a range of issues. Uh, One of the major problems is lack of representation. Uh, Most technical content on the internet showcases perspectives shaped by certain cultural, gender, or socio-economic backgrounds. These biases reinforce stereotypes such as the notion that only specific groups are default contributors or users of technology. It is often seen that, as you can see, as you can see on the slide, it is often seen that content reflects a Western or white-centric perspectives, ignoring cultural diversities in examples, metaphors, or illustrations, and not taking into account other people of the world who might access your content. Let's quickly talk about an example. I recently came across a blog that had Thanksgiving dinner scheduling as the comparator for the original content that was being described. Well, you know, that's great. The example is great, and I'm sure a lot of people might have gotten the concept in minutes. But take a moment to think about it. How would someone from a culture where Thanksgiving isn't celebrated or even recognized interpret this example? It might blank out a significant portion of your readers and leaving them completely confused or excluded from understanding the analogy. Another issue worth highlighting is tackling high levels of language in documentation and high levels of technical literacy as well. This issue right here is worth another talk or two, so I won't be digging into this one, but I'll leave you with this thought before moving on. Speakers of different languages may be experts in different things. So we need to keep in mind that different underrepresented groups may not be experts in the same things experts of the West are. They might be experts in holistic medicine, farming, animal husbandry, mathematics, or literature. Words familiar to one might be unheard by someone else. The point I'm trying to prove or make here is that complex language often complicates simple content. This complex language might seem professional to some, but might be a deal breaker for others who might speak your language as their second or even the third language. Time and again, numerous guides have stressed the advantages of using plain language in your content that can be understood by most in this world. Yeah. Next, the last group, and probably the most important group we'll talk about, is people with accessibility issues. This section is crucial, not only because accessibility impacts a lot of people in this world, but it is also the surprisingly least spoken about when it comes to technology or documentation. When we talk about accessibility, we are addressing a wide range of needs. There have been a lot of accessibility issues that have been around since the inception of technology, and I'll aim to discuss some of them here today. Let's start our discussion by talking about alt texts or alternative texts. If you've used HTML before, I'm sure you might have come across this tag right here. What does it say? Well, what does it mean? Well, a lot. Alternative text or alt text is a way to textually describe images, screenshots, or videos and other graphic elements in your content. It is basic. It is a basic need for individuals with visual impairments who might rely on screen readers to interpret content. And in case you don't know what a screen reader is something it is basically a way to make your phone or your device scream about each and every single thing you touch or select. And the alt text is what the phone screams when you interact with a graphic. There we go. In fact, this ignorance is so common. All texts are often considered unimportant and ignored on. But what happens is, if these images are not properly described, people relying on screen reader can completely go clueless about what's happening. Or even worse, give up on the content because they're not able to understand it. In fact, this ignorance is so common that 39% of web content does not provide alt text for almost all or most images. Let's take another example of how low color contrast in your content can affect this group of people. Now again, we as normal people might never notice it, but static websites or documents with poor color contrast can be challenging for users with visual impairments. In fact, it has been proven time and again that people with low vision are often unable to navigate through and even interact with such content that do not follow proper design standards. Now, when I talk about design standards, what I am talking about exactly, the thought box again. Well, as much as I would like to do the big reveal now, I'll talk about, oh shit, sorry. Yeah, as much as I would like to do the big reveal now, I'll wait for some more time. I'll tell you some more stuff, and then we'll actually look at what those standards mean. But we just saw about a part of accessibility. We just saw how people with, visionary or visual accessibility needs face difficulty in documents. But there is another part. There are a lot of parts of when we talk about accessibility. But there is also this part called auditory accessibility, which is next. Documentation and technical content to what it has evolved today includes not only text but graphics, as we just talked about earlier while discussing about all texts. Let's focus on video tutorials as an example. Videos are a common medium to explain complex technical concepts nowadays, product demos or even walkthroughs, and much, much more. Yes, videos definitely are a great way to make people understand your content in minutes, and they are visually very informative as well. But they often depend heavily on spoken narration to convey critical details, like what you see here, which is also good. But for individuals who are hard of hearing or deaf, as the world likes to call them, the same video might be either completely ununderstandable or semi-understandable. And I say this because almost 70 million people in the world suffer from complete loss of hearing, and the number goes to around 1.5 billion when we talk about people with either some degree of hearing loss or people who use hearing aids on a daily basis. So what's the problem here? The problem here is not having closed captions, or we say captions, or transcript renders for your video elements or graphic elements. Well, for those unaware, captions are those little written dialogues you see on your Netflix show at the bottom of the screen, providing a text representation of spoken words and important sounds like door creaks or suspenseful music plays. A transcript, on the other hand, is a detailed written document that captures all the audio content of a video or audio file, including dialogue, sound effects, and even pauses or non-verbal expressions. The absence of these captions and/or transcripts renders these videos inaccessible. Another problem is the quality of captions. When captions are provided, they need to be accurate and perfectly synchronized with the video content. Poorly crafted or mistimed captions can lead to misunderstandings, creating confusion instead of clarity for viewers who completely rely on them. So we have talked enough about problems here now. Why does all of this matter again? Why? While these issues are not deal breakers at all, the idea that people should simply adjust and fit in misses the point. This brings me to the definition of inclusivity I promised to share. Inclusivity isn't about forcing people to fit in. It is about creating a sense of belonging. When someone engages with something, whether technical content, a community, a product, or a space, they should feel as though it was genuinely designed with them in mind, as though they truly belong. So, summarizing, we have looked at issues faced by these groups, namely LGBTQ people, underrepresented groups, and people with accessibility issues. And you might now wonder, how can we fix this, or how have people made efforts to fix this? Well, time for the drum roll, and enter open source. Open source projects, or open source software, for those unaware, is software made by passionate people, in turn for other passionate people to use, improve, and benefit from. Open source projects and communities have long been the forefront of setting new standards, not just for innovation, but for inclusivity too. You see, because open source is accessible to the whole world, by their very nature, open source ecosystems thrive on diversity, global contribution, and collaboration. And the principle of making everything accessible for all, it's just embedded because you get contributions from all around the world. So there's just no point making it for one single person. Now, let me introduce you to some of the leaders in promoting and fostering inclusivity within the open source umbrella. I'll be focusing on two major organizations here today. They're going to be Kubernetes and Cloud Native Computing Foundation. A quick introduction about these organizations. First, CNCF, or the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, is an umbrella organization for open source projects and communities that empower or use cloud native computing. Among the flagship projects or graduated projects, as CNCF likes to call them, is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an advanced container orchestration platform designed to automate deployment, scaling, and management of containerized applications. Well, let's see how these people or these organizations have made efforts. Starting off with code of conduct. The approach here starts with a strict and comprehensive code of conduct. Now, what is a code of conduct and why is it related here? Well, a code of conduct is a foundational document that sets clear expectations for behavior within an organization. Kubernetes and graduated projects under CNCF both have put forward detailed COCs, or code of conducts, that explicitly prohibit harassment based on race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or any other personal characteristics. It also outlines actionable steps to address violations, such as reporting mechanisms and consequences which ensure accountability. By embedding inclusivity in its entire structure and framework, these CNCF graduated projects, or even some incubating projects are basically projects which are not yet 100% to the mark, but they are just in the progress. And Kubernetes as well, by just having these strict and comprehensive COC, ensure that the documentation they create also reflects those same values. CNCF and Kubernetes together have also made efforts to ensure that documentation is inclusive and free from binary pronouns. Well, yeah, I just missed the resources. You can just refer to them. They've also made efforts to, I think you've seen the slide earlier, but they've also made efforts to make their documentation inclusive and free from binary pronouns. And how is that? Instead of defaulting to pronouns like he or she, they adopt gender-neutral alternatives such as they, their, and user in their documentation. This practice is evident throughout the Kubernetes documentation, CNCF guides, and other associated resources. They've implemented this in new documentations and made efforts to change existing ones to adapt to this. These changes may seem straightforward when applied to a few documents in your organization, but implementing them across your organization's entire body of textual content is the real task. CNCF highly also values diversity and inclusion across its audience, well, apart from documentation, be it community, users, and even employees, or even hiring. They do have a lot of grants and other resources for these diverse people to engage with. Now, remember we talked about standards when we were discussing about high contrast themes? Standards or guidelines that we talk about. So these standards that I was talking about is, well, WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Now, WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are internationally recognized standards created to make web content more accessible to people with disabilities. These guidelines cover a broad spectrum of accessibility aspects, and they guide developers, designers, and writers in creating content that everyone can access. The latest rendition of WCAG is WCAG 2.2, and you might be surprised to know that 98% of the content on the web fails to comply with these WCAG standards. Kubernetes and CNCF and all other open source projects, most of the open source projects, heavily rely on documentation, and almost all of their documentation and technical content you would find is made with WCAG rules in their core. Great. This one last thing I want to discuss about when it comes to innovations in this field. We'll talk about ASL first a little, and then I'll come to that. Well, ASL is American Sign Language. It is a visual communication language for people with hearing aids. Traditional written texts often fall short for people who rely on visual communication language. The Deaf and Hard of Hearing group at CNCF has made efforts to come up with Gen ASL, which is generative AI-powered American Sign Language avatars. Well, what is it? This is the system workflow for it, but I'll just quickly explain to you what it means. Well, you have a video file or an audio file or a text file. You just put it into Gen ASL, and what it generates for you is sign language-based avatars. And how does it do this? Well, you can look at this video. So what it does is you get those files, it converts it to a ASL gloss, which is a term in those models, and then it finally converts it to a video. This effort is, although in its initial stages, it's great and can be used eventually to turn technical content into something which is not only read, but can be seen but accessed fully throughout, imagine your content, technical content being accessible entirely through sign language in the universal language of signs. So the message I want to put forward from this entire talk is very simple. Inclusivity issues in documentation and technical content is indeed a real-world issue. Inclusivity doesn't only mean addressing language barriers of the world, but it spans much more, from LGBTQ individuals to ensuring accessibility for all. We as responsible documentarians should continuously strive to understand these diverse needs of these diverse audiences, incorporate solutions that reflect their experiences and push the boundaries of what inclusive documentation can look like. Changes are definitely made gradually, and together we can transform how the world experiences and interacts with technical content. So let's move forward, informed and inspired, to write the docs that truly write the future. Docs that everyone, everywhere can belong to and benefit from. Thank you. Dhanyawad. Shukran.
Given that you're from India, one of the earlier talks was mentioning Australian English as being a potential problem for their documentation. Is there a particular thing that is a known issue for people from India, given that a lot of what we get on the internet is very American?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question?
A lot of what we have on the internet today is very American-centric. So.
I see. So you're saying Indian people have problem understanding Australian?
No, I'm saying, is there a particular problem that you're seeing in your community with regards to documentation that we might not be aware of in Australia?
I don't think. I mean, it's just, I have tried not to speak about language as much as possible, because languages, inclusivity and languages, it's spoken about a lot. I think we had a similar talk in Write the Docs Atlanta as well, given by Ali Duver. So I tried not speaking about languages, but I don't think there are issues I'm aware about that you need to be concerned about as living from someone from Australia. Yeah, they're just all there.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? Yeah, so just in the front row there. Well, not front row, middle row.
I was interested to see the ASL automation there. So one of the challenges is there's not just one sign language in the world. So that would have to be, again, keyed to Australian Sign Language, British, Guyanan, Papua New Guinea has like 100. So it's really easy to look at inclusivity as something that's impossible, because what are we going to do about sign languages is enough to explode your brain, and there's no way you can fund that. Have you had any success in promoting inclusivity in a company that worries about money? That's my question.
Oh, great question.
Well, as I said, the talk was all about inclusivity in open source, because open source projects are generally about passion. They are made for passionate people by passionate people, and I don't think money is the first, the first target when it comes to open source projects. So that is why I think open source projects have been more successful than other companies. But the big fours, the FANGs, I think they have pretty strict inclusivity guidelines as well, as far as I'm concerned. Google, Amazon, these two I know about, have pretty good inclusivity guidelines and code of conducts and everything. So that's there, but all those other companies in between, yeah, that's a problem. That is something that needs to be solved. Yeah.
Okay, we've got time for two more. I'm going to hold it at two, and we'll start with...
Are you aware of Chaos, the community health analytics and open source software, the initiatives they're doing? They're sponsored by like GitHub and GitLab as sort of, they have like a badging initiative for open source projects to hit specific metrics and sort of be acknowledged by those parties. And if you are aware, do you feel like that sort of can translate to private industry and enterprise work?
So again, you were asking about...
Chaos, it's a specific open source project, community health analytics and open source, open source software. They do a DEI, so diversity, equity and inclusion, like badging work with open source projects.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that sort of thing can then translate to being used in enterprise and for private industry?
Well, I'm aware about DEIs, I've read about them while I was researching for this talk, but again, I think it's very open source to do DEI surveys, and I am not sure if that can be, implemented in private companies. So I think the answer to that must be no, but yeah.
And we've got one more question just over here, and that's where we'll wrap it up for the day. Well, this talk, not the day.
It's actually more of a comment than a question for my fellow attendee over here. Just with regards to uptake, at Atlassian we take all of this very seriously. Accessibility is a big project for us. And what we've found is that humanising it has really been the most important thing. So by having hour-long sessions, lunch breaks, with interviews with people who have had accessibility problems using our products, and we can see firsthand where their challenges lie. And then we feel like we owe it to them to actually help them because we see their struggles. We watch their screen, they have a screen reader, they show us how bad their experience is, and we're shocked. And so that makes us more motivated to try and fix it, not just because legally we want to do it and need to do it, but because we feel more connected with them. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's great. We always like to hear multiple perspectives of this sort of thing. It's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's where we're going to leave the Q&A for this session. But before I do a little bit more housekeeping, I just want us to take a moment to thank Eeshaan.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.